I think 80s in India was, according to me, a renaissance in many ways. First of all, we had socially kind of relevant architecture taking a center stage. Issues of slum housing and how do you better that? People talked about human-centric approach. Typically, that time there were only 7 to 8 schools of architecture. Architecture was very young or not so known as a profession. Okay, but nobody has ever asked me, where are you from? In fact, when I left, they said, oh, you're not in Montreal? Not from Montreal? So it was that kind of a way that city grew on you and you became a part of it. Look at this. Very sincere, not doing anything other than the copybook, textbook.
Then probably Manav Sadhana. Yes.
Oh, and this is, of course, Manav Sadhana model, the second phase, eventually working in 18 villages. And this was the first one. Sonam Wangchuk, he came to Sanitation Institute. Jayesh Bhai is there, and I was explaining him the concept, and he was very happy. Of course, he's a modest person, and he says, I learn a lot, but no other way around, that there's a lot to learn from him. Right from my foundation days, we had started this tradition. Proud to have met these personalities, as Professor Abdul Kalam, Dr. and Narendra Bhai Modi. This time he was a chief minister, and of course Abdul Kalam Sahib was the president. Every time I wrote a small little wish poem or something, and that's what we used to present. But even after I left Vastushilp Foundation, we continued with that tradition.
Namaskar everyone. We are thrilled to mark our threshold with a special guest who is also my mentor, an academician, researcher, and a practicing architect Yatin Pandya. This session was a bunch of untold stories and many impactful perspectives. We have unfolded many chapters like foundation, the architecture lineage, and the impact. This session was, a very refreshing start for me, whereas I believe it will be a discovery for you. So just sit back and feel relaxed and enjoy our podcast, The Myth of Expensive Sustainability by architect Yatin Pandya. I am your host, architect Siddharth Prasad. Namaskar, sir.
Namaste.
A very warm welcome to you on Concept Talks 2.0.
I'm honored and glad.
How are you, sir?
Excellent. Thank you.
I'm feeling very excited to unfold many questions and their learnings along with many untold stories with you.
I'm very glad and eager to share, and that will also help me remind my path and journey.
So, shall we begin Bachit with your permission, sir?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, sir, we have always begun understanding architecture from you, but today, can we start it from your childhood memories?
All right. No, sure. I think, as they always say, that you shape the environment and environment shapes you. Likewise, you are is what you do, and what you do is also what makes you who you are. So I think there have been a lot of those dimensions that would have been part of, right from my DNA to my upbringing to my kind of that nurturing. And those kind of help you set in you certain kind of values. So one of the things that I do attribute to is my grooming in joint family, an extended family amongst 11 siblings of a typical middle class family.
Okay.
But what it did teach us is the values of caring and sharing. Anything that you did had to be shared, and you had to also accommodate within those given stretched resources. So that was a very big value, and that has stayed on and has been part of a lot of work that we do as well. It's just a natural thinking process that that particular factor does come in play. Similarly, that also meant a little bit of paucity of resources.
Okay.
And I think that's very important because that was the seeding point of so called creativity. That when you don't have enough, you try and invent things. So I remember I never got bored of vacation. I love vacation even now. But there was never a problem of finding activities. We used to make our own toys out of waste material. I remember having made television. We didn't have television at home or radio, but out of a soap, cube or using capsule, empty pockets, make a train. I mean, n number of things, even cricket ball out of the cycle rings, over the paper lump. So, in point is that it's not actually any suffering we are talking about, but that led to a lot of these qualities, and it also gave a little bit of appreciation for what is around. So rather than abhav, scarcity, one felt appreciation for what came one's way. So that caring, sharing, and this, so which naturally meant that thinking of a fellow human being and also being part of the environment or the nature which whatever supplied to you. So we're more inherently, fundamentally rooted into the whole cycle of upbringing in the childhood, etc. And also what it did was that it helped you prioritize things about what was essential, important in your life, in your doing things. So when you have little less, then you prioritize that is. So for example, there were limited things for typical luxury, but there was always surplus and abundance for anything to do with education. So that was the priority of the family. Every family, next generation had to build its own kind of thing through education. And that's how this also laid another set of values that you understand what is essential, what could be compromised, and yet you can live. So I think those are the kind of subtle and smaller things that help shape your mindset and shape your attitude. So it comes naturally into you, what they call sanskar. It's not something externally instilled, it just becomes a part of your routine. So DNA is, in a sense, kind of externally conditioned by your day to day, what they call way of life. So I think I do credit to my upbringing in a middle class family and amongst the siblings, and we've still stayed together. There has been a very strong family bond, and it's once you connect to another fellow human being, there is no distinction that because it's my sister, because it just gives you a natural way of being able to be a bond with any fellow human being. So I think it's in that light, connecting to a person, compassion, and understanding each other, accommodating each other becomes a natural part of your trait and thinking.
So I think the model making characteristics what we see these days were inherently, inbuilt from you.
In a sense, we had
from the childhood.
Yeah, I would not even say no choice, but that was the resource that we never felt that there was scarcity of resource. We saw things around as our resource. I know, we used to do skits. We used to live in a rented house, and about, as I say, 11 plus 5, 16 people in a kind of a sort of a semi-chawl rented place. We used to sleep on top of the cupboards of the quilts and whatnot. And daytime, that was the living room. So there was anything around. So what I was meaning to say is that we would use those bed sheets, create a backdrop, and have a drama skit And I remember wearing I was small, but I mean, the pant and shirt of somebody to play a character. So I think you enjoyed that, and you invented things. So everything never felt scarcity, but everything around was seen as a resource.
So, I mean, your birthplace is in Ahmedabad itself?
No,
Okay.
strangely, I was born in Delhi.
Oh.
Strangely, in the sense that my maternal uncle was a chief engineer in railways, and at that time, he used to be stationed all over India, and he must have been in Delhi. And usually, as a tradition, mother goes to the parental house. So I happen to have been born in Delhi,
Okay.
but I remember the episode because till 23 years hence after my birth, I'd never been to Delhi.
Oh.
And I remember a very funny incident that I studied in Xavier School, which was considered to be a very good school then. But we always have that periodic educational inspection, in the school. So the inspector happened to go to every class, so came to our class, and the standard question, they thought the simplest question they can ask is, how many of you are from Delhi? I don't know why they asked, and I wasn't sure whether should I say I'm from Delhi or not, just because I'm born.
Okay.
But after that, I've never been there and I know nothing about it. So actually, my finger was half raised, So I was the one to be spotted. So say, yes, can you tell me what is the color of a red fort? And I'm not sure if I said yellow or red. So that's the kind of unusual bond with that city.
Okay, so do you hold any memories of hobbies of school time?
Well, see, hobbies have been again a part of sort of a situation you are in and the opportunities you get, and that kind of comes out and manifests. But during school days, as I said, that the task and sincerity to that occupied most of it. But I remembered in school days, in the recess, I used to go to the library to read this encyclopedia,
Okay.
So it was not that I had to mug up spelling or anything. That also one of our teachers always advised that keep that. I used to keep this Collins Webster small dictionary with you. I grew up or studied in a Gujarati medium, but I think our foundation in the grammar and the other language were made stronger. So I used to keep that dictionary always in, and even teacher would ask for a spelling, I'll open. So the idea was hunger for something new. So that was a pastime, that was a kind of entertainment. So vacation, it was not a boring and it was not a studiousness, but knowing two more things around you, knowing the meaning of something. So that was one. I did like playing and whatever sport. We used to invent sport, and those
Cricket, football.
traditional cricket was even a fancy, as I said, that we had to have ring ball, never had a proper tennis ball.
Okay.
But point was that there was kochamni, that in the mud that you sort of spike the little iron rod and go how far you go. I mean, those were the sort of traditional games then. So
Gilli Danda, I guess.
Gilli Danda, of course, marble, tap, a lot of those which were a common thing. And we used to invent also Nagolchu and stuff like that. So yes, pastime, you played games. And that time film was not something, yes, in a school we used to be screened and going to a good school, but otherwise whole family going to a film was a rarity. So those were the things of that time. But later on, like very first semester in CEPT, and there was a elective called photography that I had taken. And of course, there was no camera before. So my father got me Minolta SRT 101 second hand from somebody via we knew. But photography became a very passionate hobby then. Anytime, wherever I used to carry tripod, SLR camera. I remember after that, Zurich, my first scholarship, I saved money and bought a Nikon and f4 sort of zoom lens and whatnot. So point was that photography, and it very first semester itself I got highest in photography.
Oh.
So the point was that I think that whole thing, when you don't have, probably you looked around a little more closely, and then when you had an instrument with you, you could actually try those things out. So as I said, as an education instrument, we got that. In fact, I was one of the few in the class who had a camera then. Otherwise, every of my colleague was very well placed in other sense, But again, coming back to, so that's where photography became, architecture later on gave amazing opportunity to travel. So if I say today, it's been added with not only photography but travel. So go to places. So any free time we get, or any chance I have to go out, I might take extra day on my own to go around and visit. So traveling has been a big part of things. Listening to music. So obviously you start with the film music, then you slightly graduate to the ghazals and all. I do like ghazals because there's a poetry value in it, So it's not just the sound and the thing, but it goes with the lyrics. So that's my favorite. And then of course you gradually get attuned to a little bit of classical, first the instrumental and then the classical. In my school days, I had the highest stock of recordings of even the pop and the rock then, whether it was Beatles and Boney M were the pop types, but you had Pink Floyd and the other Jethro Tull, etc. So that time you were into it, and then again, I mean, it's not that I could buy many of those cassettes, but you found friends and they would have that. So I'll go with my cassette and get it recorded there. So somewhat of music, a lot of photography, and even more traveling is what has now become a part of me. And then I must say, thanks to Mr. Doshi, I remember I came back from Canada after my post graduation, and one of the first project I'd done masters in kind of, it's called architecture, but it was emphasis on housing. And when I returned, the very first project, I was there before also, but after was one of the developer project in Alibag. And, once you start becoming part of it, you involve fully. So at our own initiative, I created a brochure and did a copywriting of that. And then Doshi would, as he was, there was always freedom and opportunity. So it was for you to take whatever initiative you take. So he asked, who wrote this? I said, I did. And I mean, shakily, because coming from Gujarati medium, but just that thing of expressing what it is in this, and audiovisual medium also. So I'd made a presentation, and then he kind of liked it in the sense that, okay, his exact word were that I must find what's hidden in you, no? Okay. So that's where, and then I ended up writing the very first article for Times of India on my own, and luckily that time they would take other articles. And it then ended up in DNA, writing for 3 year continuous, some, I don't know, 170 articles in newspaper on different aspects. The point is that it is that kind of a seed, little bit of encouragement or little bit of a positivity about that I started writing. Gujarati was my medium, so at home I used to, in a spare time, express myself through poems that I would write. I like poetry more than the prose. Where I think there's abstraction, there is a kind of ideology, philosophy, whatever you call it. So I like poetry as a medium. So in Gujarati, I write poems on my own, but that subject writing and all. And then it so happened that I did ghostwrite many of Mr. Doshi's articles or some or the other things, So it is that kind of a, so link, and seeds may have been sown somewhere, but certain kind of right environment, in the right time, in the right place, things come up. So it is that maybe things were latent inside, and you get a right, somebody opens the lid and things come out on their own. So that sort of thing led me to then writing also. So then that ended up, not knowing ever in my dream that one day I'll write a book. Ended up so far writing 6 published books, which have run through various editions, and also other report writings and articles and whatnot. So that became another stream of activities then.
Okay.
So starting by making toys and other things in a spare time, to when at a particular age you always fall in love with anything and everything. So that is the time you make your own cards, etc. There's always ego that it's not a ready-made anything. I'll make my own
Oh, no.
sort. So it was also that kind of a ego and that zeal. So good, bad, ugly, I don't assess, but led me to involve, and that's a challenge that you put to yourself, that you've done this time, but so tomorrow you have to do something afresh. So that's what kind of drove me in, because that gives you involvement. So it doesn't become a burden. You think that you have to think of another thing afresh, and therefore you spend time, you feel involved, and it keeps you going. Writing 3 years continuous article, and I don't think I have missed one on at my account.
Okay.
Even I remember, if I was traveling to Pune, 2:30 in the hotel, also I've
Okay.
finished writing an article. And it's not writing, but it makes you think.
Okay.
So that's very useful about it, because when you write, words become committed, and that calls for clarity. And clarity comes from conviction. So you have to do
Exactly.
a lot of those thinking and blockbusting. So these things indirectly help each other. So that's been the plethora of activities other than the core work that I.
So I think, sir, we are talking about early 80s, I think, at that time. So we kind of, used to follow some trends of that time. So have you followed any kind of trends like, bell bottoms or?
No. First of all, when you mentioned 80s, in my personal reading, I think 80s in India was, according to me, a renaissance in many ways. First of all, 47, we got independence, and about 25 years then. So 70s, mid 70s, and early 80s. What started happening was that people started looking inward rather than, first you always follow from outside, then you get trained there and try and implement here, but after, it's like a child becoming an adult, wants to have its own identity. So I think that was the phase for India. And why I say renaissance is that we had art films, what they call parallel films, like Ardh Satya and Earth and Chakra, which had no, song, no kind of running around the trees, no chocolatey heroes or heroines, like Om Puri was a hero in that, or Shabana Azmi or Nasiruddin Shah. So the point was that it went to the purer and core kind of aspect of art, indigenously created, and it also spoke about social issues. So rather than covering it up and romanticize it, through the medium, brought that out. Same way, from a typical film songs, we had ghazals becoming a household name. Mr. Ghulam Ali Mehndi Hassan to Jagjit Singh, Chitra Singh, and whatnot. So it, in a way, raised the kind of popular taste. And same was with architecture, that we had socially kind of relevant architecture taking a center stage. It was early 80s that even signatory architects like Mr. Doshi and Korea, they went into low-cost housing. They talked about issues of slum housing and how do you
Okay.
better that. People talked about human-centric approach. People talked about alternative technologies. So Revati Kamath and
Oh,
Vasant Kamath,
yes.
they were doing all they were doing, but their mud architecture became a core stream way of looking at things. Same way, Laurie Baker, Mr. Gandhi's
Yes.
request, he was in India, he's made his home, but we've never taught that till then. But around this time, when climate was ripe, the work that he was all the time doing became a little visible. And people thought this was a good kind of a model we should also look into. So he started becoming a popular person in that sense. So this, and also that whole thing about indigenous.
Mm.
So people started questioning about what is the worth of our own architecture that we have inherited, and likewise. So I think that introspection, if you think politically and otherwise, that was also the time there was a kind of closed economy. So we had nationalized the banks, and we were not affected by what happens to the US president and whatnot. It was always the internal thing. We had actually, for certain reasons, thrown out Coca Cola, and we
Okay.
had our own thumbs up coming in instead. So that was the climate. And in one of the presentation, I said it is the kind of way that probably I became a typical angry young man. Angry young man in the sense that questioning what's happening in society, thinking about the larger aspects of the sort of national and social well being and things like that. And I remember even in my school days, in my housing, I had taken that time a stand of every house growing their own vegetable, harvesting roof water right from terrace, and this and likewise, and decentralized sanitation. And just because of my housing, that was fifth semester, so second year, third year, I was just about 19 and 20. I remember our teachers, Leo Pereira, Meena Ben, they were sensitive, and they took the whole class to Ishwar Bhai Patel in Gandhi
Mm.
Ashram, who was the proponent of alternative sanitation, just to let us be exposed to that also. I ended up doing my thesis, undergrad and master's both, on user built houses, so looking at slum, but creating the spaces that are socioculturally appropriate from that point of view. So, what I meant is that I think groomed us, and childhood values that the way you lived, but this kind of gave a little exposure to the larger questions of things, and that was also the time that hero itself became a villain. So Mr. Bachchan wore a very broad bell bottom and all. And being the youngest in the sibling, I did wear 44-inch bell bottom, but it was not a newly tailored one. That was too
Okay.
much of a cloth, and I always inherited clothes. So I remember in architecture, I've also worn my sister clothes and her bell bottom or whatever. So yes, so you did your own fashion then. Looking back, I think it's looking stupid, but so you did all that. You've been there, done that, but now you make up your own value system. That what is now right for you works for you. So of course, as I said, that time we had all the pop and English songs without any of these common platform from where you can now easily push off the button, get it. So that hunger was there, the desire was there, the liking was there. So as I say, wherever my brother's friend had some collection of records, and I would go there, John Baez or whatnot, and in my class, we were the most equipped with all those music which was recorded from these sources and got it. So yes, you've done all of those things. Films. We actually in a school, and I don't know, somehow these things are getting second priority because I think you people get too much of exposure. We used to have film club, and I remember we've seen Kurosawa's Japanese director's film way back then. We saw MC Escher's animation film then. So I think a lot of these things was a common platform created at CEPT as a film club that you could compensate through, likewise. So I think it was not that we were deprived, but we found alternate sources to be part of that. I remember when I went to Montreal for higher studies, I used to bicycle to the Canadian Film Board. At that time, Canadian Film Board had been making a lot of animation films. It was like our Bollywood in a sense. They were another one which were making art films and things like that. And I used to go there, look through their video library and watch things there. So there was $1 cinema, repertoire cinema. So you got all these old films and directors every Tuesday coming in for $1, and I saw a lot of films there. I like that medium a lot. When you ask hobbies, this is one more that I like. I like audiovisual medium and watching films, but I like to observe things in that and do that. So this is how we were part of whatever little world, and even beyond that we could probe. And yet that was the era of questioning about your roots, Indianness. The seeds had been put in there. That is also the time after 25 years of India's initial efforts in setting up institutions and all, they had come of an age. So sometimes sooner we had our own first atomic bomb blast or experiment, and we were into space science, etc. So on one hand, we were beginning to get our in-house resources in science, in arts, in other fields. We were beginning to feel we can be independent by the support of those. And at the same time, ideologically, you felt more inclined to those sort of things. And that closed economy also meant that things of the local nature mattered more than external forces. So that was the 80s that I grew up in terms of academic career. So that is where 78 I joined architecture. So that was the core time where a lot of these things mattered, or this was the part of the environment. And that was a late teenage, so when you join architecture, you're 18, so just about ending the teen. So, but that is where the ideology coming through these mediums, the kind of focus areas, core issues became those, not whether I-17 model is right or I-19 is right, or technology like this is better or not. So you were very update. As I say, people used to ask me for photography. Even in Montreal, where I went, what I had learned here is what I used to experiment there, polarizing and solarizing and whatnot. And we, in fact, made audiovisual packages, and we used a lot of those experimentation there. So point was that once you got into that, then a lot of these encouraged you to try things, and the thinking started getting a little stronger, because now your heroes around that were also the ones who were doing this. That's what molded me to do my thesis into a slum housing, so to say, And I remember because of me, and a lot of my classmates and whole were also taken to the slum. And that time, that was a big thing. As I said, signatory architects were doing the low-cost housing and slum, talking about that. Books were, or articles were being written, whether it was Korea talking about Mumbai scenario, or, what was happening here with IUDP Vasna, and likewise. So I think at that time, most of the theses were done on housing related issues and all. So it was very topical to think about these issues. So I think that era that one came in, I think our priorities were towards these features very naturally.
So one thing, sir, I want to bring the audience focus on that we not only specialize into design, but we also carry a good quality of photography skills also. So, sir, amongst all those things, what was that time, or where did architecture find its way to you? Also, sir, was it a first choice as a career?
uh, again, things start instilling somewhere or the other. Call it a constellation that starts building up, or call it is something within you and you pick up at that time. But the first honest answer is that typically that time there were only 7 to 8 schools of architecture. Architecture was very young or not so known as a profession,
Okay.
But so naturally, all my siblings, there were some doctors, some were engineers, some double graduates and whatnot. So typically the thing was that you should become a doctor, engineer, likewise. And I had, also taken a BSc with a group that first year BSc we had to take for medicine, and I did not get into medicine. And that's where the latent thing was about architecture now. And with God's grace, I finally got it into a very good school, and out of many, I didn't know I was good for that or not knowing what really it is. But that was one kind of avenue which was building in my mind. Why that is that one is our house was at that time 71 1971 was designed by a professional, but his name is also Hasmukh Patel, but not the architect Hasmukh Patel, but an engineer Hasmukh Patel. So profession through non-professional was being conducted, and we had a professional experience coming in of what that profession means to me because of our house that time what was getting designed and built. So there was a little understanding of architecture. Then while we were doing things for activities and all, creating something was an urge and an hunger. And that is where I think this direction would lend itself to, was something in the mind. And I remember the fascination. So as I say, many things work on you. I absolutely distinctly remember, we were living in this house, we had created new neighbors, which were also known from some of our past kind of neighborhood and association. And evening, they were all little older to me, 11 people plus neighbors, all going for some time an ice candy or sometime going out because it was available in the university area. So having passed by CEPT campus, that time School of Architecture, I remember boasting, not knowing that time I was a kid, this is my school, kind. So there was this fascination for the kind of architectural building or campus, the awe about, like, you may not have gone to IIM, but that whole elitist kind of aura that we hear about that, or NID. So likewise, is School of Architecture. So that all had compounded, and then when I didn't get into medicine, very obvious choice was to get into architecture. And that time there were only 7 schools. There was open exams, interviews, and luckily one got through in that. There were only 30 seats, and I think barring 5 or 6 people, they were all over outside the state, and so it was very tough competition to begin with. Although profession was young, but because there were less schools, there were a lot of applicants, and so that's how I got into architecture, and I don't think I have regretted a bit. I can't imagine myself if I got into medicine, I would have suffocated, because I can relate that to that. We had to do preliminary and BSc 1 year to get into the architecture before. But till the results were out of the architecture. I had already gone into the BSc second year, and I remember every sort of class, sincerity never allowed me to bunk the class. I would just say, first class is over, second class is over.
Okay.
It never, sunk in anything that I was being part of. So I'm thankful that finally it got me into the right area.
So there might be talking about constellations and their connections. So it might not be written in a way to pursue medical science or certain things as a career, but later it eventually came into your life due to brilliant.
Yes, as my spouse, yes. So it got filled up.
Because
If you want
I
to say
think
the
it
boxes,
was, if you're not taking it
boxes
in a
were
career,
filled up.
I'll definitely give it in another way.
Maybe, yes.
So, sir, matlab, usually we used to call it school, but if we see it is a college, we name it as a school.
Yeah.
So, how you see it is basically a school or a college?
I would say college in the sense of it let you do what you want to do. It was your initiative, your hunger. But school in terms of providing you with many things. So whatever area, as I gave you an example that in my class, I was the only one to talk about local sanitation and bringing things back. And then the teachers were positive that they took the whole class to Gandhi Ashram to understand some of these dimensions. So whatever area that you took, it was allowed to be nurtured. So there was, people often say that, oh, there's modernism prevailing, but because of that time, because of all those, kind of exposure and the value system, but at the same time, this social aspects and other kind of alternative aspects were equally allowed. So it was not forcing you to get into something, and yet there were teachers, professors who held your hand to take you to think. So it was your initiative and interest to get involved into things. As much you would want to get involved, as much was available to you. And I remember, when, of course, Mr. Doshi, this was his school, and a lot of his friends, architects from the world, not only from India, would want to come to Ahmedabad to look at Corbusier's work, to meet Mr. Doshi, Khan, etc. So both for the tourism as well as for the other association with Mr. Doshi. So they would come to city. Otherwise, Ahmedabad was not even a tourist city. So why would they be kind of here? But it is those aspects that led a lot of people to come here, and we used to get the whole exposure without internet, without all those things. So we were very well exposed in that sense. A lot of international architect came and lectured there. Even Buckminster Fuller came here to the school. We had Fry Otto's secretary, Ada Schauer, who came. So we knew Fry Otto then. I don't know how many students know him now, who did Munich Olympic Stadium, etc. So I think we were quite exposed for a kind of profession that we were a part of, and a city that we were in, as not a major city people would travel through. But I think it was all those sort of things that led to good exposure. And so in that sense, school or college was never a dialogue that time. In fact, to add to your, kind of a terminology, because we were not connected to university, the degrees were called diploma. And the typical stigma that diploma had, the 10 plus 2 or 3, versus a very rigorous course of 12 plus 5. Before I joined, it was 6 years, So, but that apart, that was technicalities. But I think the school gave a very free environment to even do activities. A lot of activities were done by students. I remember we were one of the 2 or 3 campuses which used to run music shows. For example, we used to invite we couldn't afford the big pandits, but I remember, Mr. Rajiv Taranath would come, then Remo Fernandez before he was that popular. And a lot of those singers, as part of our annual festival and all, would come, and they would also be wanting a platform, and they would work with us, and we would create something of a decor on our own. There are no event people. And I was a little good in technology or the services then also. And I was commissioned to, by virtue of our festival, event, do up the canteen sanitation, because it was didn't have a big this thing, as part of our building construction course. We actually created benches around the canteen, which for decades people used. So what I mean is that it was your campus, you were part of it, you created everything. There used to be one workshop wall in the Sagra basement, and every year student would get the sponsorship from the paint people. Every year it would be repainted. So
Okay.
there was a newness about it, and at the same time it was all students' initiative. And you kind of took voluntarily charge of things. So that campus, still you felt it is yours. It is not where you studied, but you grew up. And there is also the age, just after teenage. So you absorb things in more than many ways. And there was a very free kind of a bonding with the faculty. So you're never afraid of them. On the contrary, they were forthcoming. You could talk to them. Some of the studio teachers, they were architect, and those who smoked could even exchange smoke with them
Okay.
in the studio. So I think that kind of a thing never led inhibition. Otherwise, to get into some school like that, coming from the kind of family that you are, looking at the other big, kind of boys there. But I think it got you into it. And I remember the very first assignment, which was just a quiz or the periodic one, and I got 10 on 10 from Professor C.B. Shah in one climate related one. And that already broke all the fears, that you were in a new place, very different place, but you could do it. Same thing was in Montreal, their very first semester, and I was the highest and whatnot. So question is not getting highest, but it gives you so much confidence that you can do it, and that's where the teachers kind of approach. And so I'm more coming back to that the way they kind of related to you, the way they allowed you to groom up to something. I remember even my schooling days, St. Xavier's, where I studied, 11 sibling, how would father really know that what is your hidden talent? They know what grades you get, what are you doing in school. All right, okay. I remember in my schooling also, Xavier's had this tradition that there was a big showcase, and each class takes a turn to display and exhibit things of that class, and students bring their own things and what. And as I say, nothing was ready made, or nothing was a collection that, I have this collection because we traveled. No. So I used to make those things, and I displayed there, I drew something. And it was my drawing teacher who read a remark on one of my diaries, which we used to have to, school diary, and said that show it to your parent. And he had written that he's good at drawing, and ask him to prepare him for that elementary and intermediate. They were the kind of government held exams on drawing skills. So once my father read that, okay, ready, go for that exam, like that. So, and that time, I mean, you never knew that you were good in drawing or not. There are many people much better than you. And sometimes you in fact develop that phobia that, oh, his drawing is so better. But I mean, little encouragement like that, as I said, Mr. Doshi appreciating my very first writing in an indirect way, but I think that gave a lot of boost. Times of India accepting my first article in a newspaper, and that was a big thing for you. So those things started giving you the confidence. But for that, you had to first take initiative, and then the environment that supports you. I think CEPT was that environment that supported a lot of these. Like, while I said that I did my thesis in slum housing, but I started on vertical element as a constituent of space. So it was a very theoretical subject for your thesis, final year research thesis. But there were some other kind of aspects, not of the topic, not of this, but that time the faculty that could guide me on this, they were scarce because some had taken commission abroad, some had been guiding other students, and those students had yet not submitted. So there was a little wait list and things like that. Thesis used to be a very long time-taking thing. There was no cut-off date for that matter, and people used to get involved in other things. So while I started with that, I had certain bunch. I gave it to some other student and went into another area that interested me. So the point here is that one, that was allowed by the system, but more importantly, both apparently seeming, opposite concerns or issues or liking could also be cultivated as part of the grooming up itself. Very first semester, not in studio and all, your subject called humanities, and I'd done an assignment of Mies van der Rohe there, and likewise. So those kinds of things prepared you. It is the foundation that in some ways taught you how to look at things, what to look at. That time it may have come as a very raw, naive, half things would have sunk in or not. But once you at least assimilate that, let it be part of your memory, then it reflects and comes out in many, many, many ways. Just one offshoot I can mention here, that George and Susan, they were the architects from Philadelphia, and she had done her own house and had a kind of taken up the warehouse and turned it into her residence. And in a warehouse, you have to borrow light from top because side lights. And she had used staircase, which did everything: her seat, her amphitheater, her display ledge, her kind of light shaft, etc., storage, the partition wall. So I remember that was a 6:30 p.m. post class, about to go home, extra lecture. But that had stayed in my mind, and she had done it through slides. There was no internet, there was no computer, there was no nothing. And I don't know how many decades later, I ended up, when I wrote a book called Elements of Space Making, that was fresh in my mind. It had been by spirit. I do not know the dimension and whatnot. And through that, I used that as one very apt example of what all can element of stair as a spatial component can do. So once you assimilate, things stay with you, and it comes back. If it's like I say, it's in the hard disk, you put keyword and it will come out like that. And that's what this school offered. Definitely gave little exposure to a middle class boy, to rest of the world, including India, showed many paths of exploring things. Architecture has no one answer to that question. So there were diverse approaches, and we were also lucky at that time that, like as I said, in our batch, there were only 4 or 5 from Gujarat. I mean, and they're also not just Ahmedabad. But we had somebody from Goa, somebody from Delhi, somebody from Mumbai, somebody from other place, so Maharashtra and all that. And even the school. So you knew each other, and there was a kind of a give and take that happened formally, informally, even simply by looking at things. That was the philosophy of Mr. Doshi's set design that time, that there should be no doors. You should cross through one classroom to go through the other. You can overlook from one classroom to the other. So just by passing through that, you would be looking at each other's work. You could talk to each other and converse, like that. So I think all those things did sink in, so a lot of these things are never conscious, that because I looked at this, I did that and whatnot.
Okay.
I remember, just as a small kind of anecdote to that, when I was doing that housing studio and I was talking about, that time sustainability was not even a word. It was a very obvious thing to do. So in my housing, I was talking about vegetable growing in the backyards. I was talking about harvesting roof water. I was talking about biogas generation and all. And as I was talking of all these, and not my batch, my 2 year senior or 3 year senior, Bharat Ramamutham, his father was in Philips, a director. And Philips had at that point in time, I'm talking about 1980, had a sticker which they used to, as an awareness, bring out and give out. That sticker was globe, earth, planet,
Okay.
and the candle burning out of that we are burning the planet, we are using all the resources and energy. And that time sticker was also a big thing. You don't get those stickers which the corporates would give out. But that Bharat saw my project, and not from my class, but he presented to me that you're doing this. Look, keep this sticker. He gifted me that sticker, and I put it on my tech board. So likewise, so I think lot many aspects of that only 150 students in the whole campus, knowing each other directly, indirectly, picking up things from each other, getting direct advice from each other, certain details in your working drawing, and always you refer to someone, how do you do this? But likewise. So I think it definitely, everything, may change later, but I think it was what School of Architecture Ahmedabad was then, is what I'm referring to, and is definitely the kind of one that helped a student like me, coming from a limited exposure place, to put it into the world arena. And it was the same CEPT that they had this international exchange. And I was one of the students selected during our batch's time, and ever first time went to overseas. Forget, even in India, I had not, as I said, gone to Delhi then after my birth. So I think it was a big thing. And that time, I remember the very first day we were in Zurich, finding your way on your own and doing all kinds of blunders at the airport, to getting into. And that time there was a World Cup going on. And in our student house where we were parked, very first night, everybody was watching television. And we never had television in India in the household name.
Exactly.
And yet to see that suddenly, we're watching and some channel changed. That time we didn't even know that there were many channels. So to see that it is changed, but nobody's getting up to do anything to the terminal. So that remote was also an awe. Oh, there are more than one channels, and the channels are changing by just something like that. I used to wonder, how is it changing? So coming from that kind of environment to now into the world arena and doing a international studio outside of your thing, that's where you now start cooking for. I used to cook for all my batchmates there, and in fact we ended up cooking for a group with which we went to Bulgaria and Yugoslavia and all, and cooked for them also, and they loved the food we had made for all of them. So again, things kind of come out which might be latent in you. I used to like food, so foodie. The taste makes you a good cook. That till you find the right combination, you go on adding this and that. So a lot of these things circumstantially come out. But these were the kind of grounds which were fertile enough, and the circumstantially there was right time, the right rain to your seeds to have grown into a sapling and then to a tree. Same was the case for my master's Montreal, that I had even when I was in schooling. Mr. Doshi had that time been more engaged with overseas work and all. So he gave lectures, but he did not take active studio for our kind of batches. But of course, he was the name. And I remember asking him for a possible practical training. I was at a water cooler on the ground floor basement of CEPT, and very kind of shakily asking him. He didn't know anybody of our batch, us in particular. And he said that, sorry, I'm filled up. You're too late. And so I never thought that I'll get into, and nor this was the reply. So I concluded I'm not right. And of course, then I went to Hasmukh Bhai Patel at C. Patel and did my training there, and all that. So the kind of, start from there. But as I say, circumstances, denial. Afterwards, there was one sort of a project, and they were looking for some help. So while I was doing my thesis, I went to Vastushilp to be assisting in that particular project for a short time. Because thesis, you have to be on your own, and we thought you'll get some small money, but more than money, that you wanted to be part of that, and I went there. And that time, Mr. Doshi soon was getting into this Vidyadhar Nagar project. And I was doing my thesis, but again, a small group, and Radhika knew me. She knew me as a good student. And this Vidyadhar Nagar cell had come up. And I thought that, I was denied in the training, and I'm not good for that studio. And then I remember Commerce College, Char Rasta, I was going on my scooter, and Radhika was in a rickshaw. And she said, Yatin, how come you're almost done with your thesis, you're not coming to studio? I said, is it? She said, no, meet Papa tomorrow. He came to the CEPT, and I saw him and says, come. So that's how I joined Sangath. But to continue the link or connect the link, so that's where, as part of Vastushilp Foundation, I was part of Vidyadhar Nagar, I was part of Aranya in the initial stages and all. But that is where there was a scholarship by Canadian International Development Agency. And as part of that bilateral contract, I was chosen to do the master's there at McGill. Of course, we had to focus on the areas of collective research, etc. And that's where I ended up doing my master's there. So the point was that I think constellations were kind enough, or just about. So at one point, the same place where I was denied, I ended up doing 24 and a half years eventually in that place. So I think those are the kind of things that you do. But it's all those no's become your challenge. So rather than taking it negatively, you make it into a challenge, and you see that it turns around. And that is your positive revenge, in a sense. The no may have been for a different reason, but still it was a no for me.
So actually, there are a lot of things coming, as a curious kid to know. But I definitely want to come on Doshi sir. But before that, one thing, which is, I think, I want to really know that you have mentioned several times that you have came from a, middle class family, and you are very proud of that thing. So there are certain things when we join architecture, we come across. So it was something before, if we see, there was limited resources, and we found where our own creativity through those elements. But the moment when you join architecture, suddenly you get a list of stationaries and
Yeah.
extensive library of tools, along with long sheets with different kind of terminologies using plan sections, so on, so on, so on. And so basically I want to understand that have you found any difficulty adapting those things in that time, or that time there was no CAD, or I think there was no
No, tools were never a
softwares.
limitation because again, there were always substitutions.
Hmm.
Not everybody would have those tools. So, architecture learning was also not deprived because of that. I remember a lot of people in the beginning, they were using this Stedler clutch pencils, and I
Exactly.
was using the regular pencil, sharpening it.
Exactly.
But they later on you got into that. But one thing, so first of all, if it's a generic question, I would say no, tools never limit you, neither in your learning nor in your, you found alternatives, and as I say, it is a learning. Suppose if because of my, I remember Professor Leo had once made a comment that your pencil is the culprit, you should have a sharp pencil. Likewise, so maybe that time the line of the pencil would have been thicker. But that didn't stop me from learning. In fact, even because of that mistake, I learned even that what does a sharp line mean? What does a hard pencil mean? We used to know that time the grade, meaning of that, what is 2H versus 2B, and what is HB, hardness and blackness, and which one is right where. So I think it, in fact, taught you many other subtleties of things, and there were alternatives available. But coming to particularly to my instance, as I said, that it was the family criteria which and priority which was very clear, that anything for education, there was always resources made available. But that would have been then pulled out from an extra entertainment, Like I used to
Hmm.
get monthly pocket money that time of 5 rupees. But 5 rupee was good for a cycle puncture.
Hmm.
5 rupee would not give you in a balcony the cinema ticket at that point in time. I don't think I ever ate anything at CEPT canteen because it's just 1.5 kilometers from my house, and I used to come back, eat, and go. So I never needed to, and at the same time, there was no such thing as, in fact, most of my classmates, because of the proximity to the place, came here and they have stayed here overnight to do assignment. They have had food, meals, etc. So my house was one epicenter where a lot of assignments would get done, group work would get done. And in fact, I used to be kidnapped, hijacked just before the exams because as I say, I would be a little more attentive in the class. I was not an extra reader per se, but that would kind of stay with me. And I was able to uh, answer a lot of things in the exams, etc. And a lot of my colleagues would come prior to the exam day to get a last minute crash course to clear the subjects, and then it became first some friends would come, some other groups would
Now
come,
this
and
whole.
not only from my batch, from those who had to repeat or whatnot. And it came to such a thing that I had to take literally class board classes, So I'd go to SEPT and take quick kind of summary of things. And I remember Professor Hazra watching from the mezzanine above, and he still kind of talks of that. But anyway, so the point was that everything was available for education, but at the sort of subsidizing from some other area and getting into that. So I was lucky to also have my cousins in US who had become doctors on their own, gone there. And I remember the stencils. We used to have rapidograph and stencil to write things, the flexicurve and ellipse template, whatnot. And as kind of when they come here, I would say no or they would not bring chocolate, But these equipments, because they were also, one of them was engineered. So in fact, that way I was better equipped, and my equipments, including camera, were shared by many people who were resourceful. But at that point in time, they thought maybe this was a better opportunity or availability. So I think it was that clarity, and therefore I think it never inhibited me to do anything. Not only here, even in Montreal, although there was stipend. But as I said, that I would explore the photography thing. Wherever we went, we had slide as a medium. That time was popular. It was very expensive because each slide costed you fortune, and also to store it, the sleeves costed you. But those were the priorities, that I would not have a soft drink or this, but I would spend much more in the photography and film that interested you. We saved enough money during our stipend, both in Zurich as well as in Montreal, to travel around on your own, So we went through many countries of Europe, traveling for a few weeks. Same way after my master's, went around to US, traveled around, bought a better camera, and likewise. So I think that's where you learn that priority, and you learn things. So when that typical upbringing and those values, core values are there. I remember going to Montreal, and often one would think that, a boy coming from a very limited circle, one is exposed to the sea, he would be too kind of lost and may convert. But I think being in a neutral place like that gave me a lot more objectivity to understand our own culture, our own values, our own taken for granted routine. And in fact, I came back more convinced about it. I did pick lots of positives from my first stint as exchange student from Zurich, as well as to Canada, learned a lot of things from there, not learned in the subject matter, but as human being, learning from different culture, and not as knowledge, but human value system beyond what we have locally here. And at the same time, it helped me think objectively what I had picked up by the family grooming, what naturally came to me as a routine was what something that I analyzed and objectively took it as my principle then. So what was a traditional routine became my now set of values and principles. But now I was convinced about it because I could now see the analysis rationale, and having compared to the global viewpoint with the local, now I could make that kind of a comparative analysis and see what was at that point in time, and for me, more appropriate, like that. So generally, none of the tools can become. I remember, and not only me, in my junior batch, while I was doing my thesis, there was a Chinese student who came to the same department. And look at this, he first came, he didn't know English that well. So he didn't even know how to cook a rice. And not that I was an expert, but I had done that a little earlier, so I would teach them. So right from there, not knowing language, what would he do? He would, in phonetically Chinese, write down all the lecture notes, sit at home, translate it in English, write his assignment in phonetic Chinese, and then convert it into English and be next day ready for the assignment. So these things for any learning, formal or informal, never a limitation. On the contrary, limitation finds you better, smarter alternative.
Okay.
In some sense, jokingly, I tell many of times my student that be lazy, in a sense that if you are to do it something within a certain time, your kind of focus, your antennas got sharp, and you might find a spark versus
Yes,
lazing
definitely.
something out over long time and whatnot. So sometimes, this out of the context, sometimes the hanging sword above your head. On the contrary, those things make you, when I said that, Montreal, I was the highest in schools, it was not about laurel, but even put in a different context, and you had no recourse, You had a stipend, you were overseas, you didn't have backup, you have to study. So we used to cook, we used to do everything like everybody else does, and yet study. And then you see you can do it. So
Exactly.
that told you that you can be rest of the world's equivalent in terms of your performance. And yet you would have been dumb in many ways to begin with to pick up, but then gradually the system. So being open and hungry to get things always gives you different ways to assimilate that, to get
Okay.
into that. Yes, you may not have fancy clothes. I remember, I mean, in a friendly terms, I went to Canada and I had a friend who had come to Vastushilp before because I worked 2 years and then went there as part of that bilateral scholarship. And he had loaned me that you're coming to Canada, you have never had such cold. So he gave me his snow boots and he gave me his overcoat and whatnot. And one of my Colombian friends used to laugh at me, look at your collar and look at this. And in a friendly term, always, people tease another friend like that. But I mean, those things never bothered you. As I said, that I wore my sister's clothes in CEPT. So it was your way of being in the league, kind of a thing. So it was not any feeling of deprivation. It was an alternative way of doing that.
Sir, can we, quote his name? Who was that friend? Just to
Well,
remember that is
no, he in fact came
is
here and has again disappeared.
okay.
Roberto Torres
Okay.
from Colombia, and he, I was just talking about him. He used to always do this. Why? Some courses we took, it was a bilingual possibility in some courses as elective courses, and things would have happened in French, and then I would be very, it broke my shyness. I was very shy. I'm still a shy person. I sit in a corner and observe rather than be a party person. So in a class, I would be attentive, but it broke my this thing to ask questions. So after all that, I would ask question, and he would say, "No, you don't know French," and you kind of, But I would have gone the gist, and I said that, look, if you have answered what I'm questioning because I need to know the language, but I think this is something that I was trying to find out, and then the wife would say, yes, this is this. Same way, I was the first one to submit assignment, and he was also good, sincere, but often he would kind of look at that and try that because my assignment being the first one, the teacher ended up showing in the class that, look, I want something like that, or this is good. So he was a little bit of a competitor. He felt himself to be a competitor, and likewise. So, but he would come every day to my apartment. I would cook extra rice, and we would have meals in my house. Many of the batchmates together. So that was, and in McGill, it was a minimum cost housing group. And we had a student from Bahrain, only one Canadian, uh, two from, Colombia, one from Mexico, uh, and likewise. So we had a multinational group, and you learn a lot from these cross exchanges and things like that. So it's that kind of a way that you pick up culture, you pick up a little bit of language, and you make friends with others, and they would all, therefore, whether they are from department or not, also would come and sit in our department. I loved pizza, and my apartment was right opposite pizza. So sometime, and then in fact the day I left, they had organized a pizza party, but they gave me the menu of Emilio's, one of the pizza shops right in front of, very good in the town, wood stove pizza and like that. So I think those are different memories and all. But apart from these kinds of non-formal aspects of learning and living life, Montreal was also a place which was exposing you to, there were jazz festivals, so very high music. But point about some of these countries that was always available in an open platform. So you don't have to spend $20 ticket to be able to be part of that. It was city's activity. There was I remember Salam Bombay, the film was nominated for Oscar, Mira Nayars, and I had invited all my classmates to be part of that film. I felt proud as an Indian. There was film festival, music festival, Formula One car racing that you could gate crash as a student and get in, to the sort of a lot of festivities, food, cinema, and music, film festival, things like that. So you were part of the whole day-to-day routine of the city. You never felt an alien and outsider, and especially Montreal, where most people were immigrants. So nobody has ever asked me, where are you from? In fact, when I left, they said, oh, you're not in Montreal, not from Montreal. So it was that kind of a way that city grew on you and you became part of it. I was in 3 different media in there, and maybe if they've all preserved those archives, I would be there. I was on the McGill radio station giving interview. I was in a kind of a video clip giving my little bit of opinion, and they were shooting the department and a few clip on that. I was also in an audience of, I think it was Pete Sampras's tennis game, when the audience, I was in Formula One car racing, a dumb who was trying to cross the track. So I was in the TV news, I was in the newspaper for an opinion poll on the front page. So you were part of that. You never felt outside of that. And on the other end, the course also exposed you to the highest of technology there. As part of 1 2 credit course, we were taken to a factory of Challenger aircraft.
Okay.
To know, like, Rolex watches, that many parts are handmade. So on one hand, it's total customization, and on the other hand, it is the highest technology. So to understand those systems, parallel to the housing production and all. So we saw that. We saw these General Motors assembly line. So we saw that factory. We saw the modular house making factory, where you have to pre-decide certain decisions and do it. And also to understand these precast, pre-concrete, fabricated application, we were taken to this Moshe Shabdi's Habitat 67. So in a small course, there was a huge amount of exposure that also one could get. So long answer, but linking back to the resources and all, it's what you pick up is all yours. There are always things around for you to get, and what you get is, and everything does not have to have a price tag. So you just look around and things are there, and somehow things keep coming to you. It is up to you how much of that you want to and how you are able to take out of that.
Okay. So, just sneaking to your archives. So sorry, without your permission, I've sneaked into your archive and I've got some memories of you.
Oh.
So, what we will do, I'll show you one by one. Interestingly, you can, just keep us in a way. What memories?
Oh my God, this is a good memory for me too. This one, as a batch, we went to a snow kind of skating, and we went on the top of one of the only Canadian, Jeff Armstrong, my batchmate. And I was the youngest, although I was there at my age of 27, I was the youngest in the class. So he was a national champion of skiing, not skating. So we went up the hill, and the thing is that you go up, those chairs takes you up, and then you have to get down. You can't just come down otherwise, So you get down, and nobody had ever taught me anything. We had borrowed those equipment. It says go down sliding. So my God, it's the first ever time, the only ever time I skied. I had to somehow come down. I remember not knowing, and you just start zooming in. Twice I got flung and hit the tree bush or something, and finally managed to come down, and then got a little inspired to do it again. But twice is what that I did. So this is our, skiing in the mountains in Montreal. Montreal.
I'm kind of getting visuals of what would have happened that time.
It would have been disaster. Twice, you would have not known me. My parents would have lost me. Once was that in this, formula racing, take a right angle picture. I was trying to cut the live track, and the car zoomed by. I could have been tung 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 in tatters. And here I could have been somewhere in a valley, but no, you enjoyed, and that was a bonding with a small group from all other parts of the world.
Okay, so second one is this one.
This is at CEPT. These are, but you have to. Oh, I'm glad to see myself with so much hair. I should show it to my son. He never has seen me with hair. And this is, I think, enough of hair. Yeah, one that extreme left to me. Yes, this is Atul Kanekar, Nilima Sharma. So these were, I was in the Vastushilp Foundation. The others were part of Sangath campus, and in the Stein Doshi and Bhalla at that point in time. So good to have memories from then.
This one is that innocent boy from middle class family.
Absolutely. Look at this. Very sincere, not doing anything other than the copybook, textbook.
That's good. So I
remember my CEPT ragging was that I used to have hair in my oil in my hair, and I think it was Khushru Kalyanwala, and that other says Nikal do kind of.
One is this one, sir.
Oh my God!
I think this is from Sangath.
Yes, this is, I ran at Sangath Vastushilp Foundation for 10 years. 2001, there was an earthquake. To 2008, the international studios. So we used to get students come from Delft, from Stuttgart, Germany, from Madrid, Spain, and sometime from Australia, etc. So that was a very, very both learning experience for us as well as for the international student, a great exposure. And we used to take live issues or situations. So, for example, inserting in existing context like a poll or open spaces of Ahmedabad or likewise. So we used to generate ideas by these. So it was a very intense workshop, anything between 7 days to 2 months, so to say. And I think this is one of them. And I think I'm discussing, Mr. Doshi is there overseeing and inputting. So yeah, they're a very wonderful memory. We have a very, very enriching time, I must say that,
Yes.
because again, people coming from different, how as an outsider they see things from here, the way I went out and also saw it, our own thing in a particular way. Same way, what do they pick up having come in a short time of India, which we take for granted. There was a lot of give and take in that sense.
So next one was this one.
Oh, so
Sir,
my unusually grown hair have hidden some of the things, but this is, I'm totally engrossed in making a chain model. This is in our second year we had done a bamboo shell grid shell model where Fry Otto, the architect who did the Olympic of Munich Stadium, had a very nice technique that you create a grid out of a linear members, and they can take whatever shape. The idea was that you hold a chain like that, like your necklace. You hold it like that, and it will always form a catenary. What is catenary? That the gravitational pull and pull between the two links would always resolve. So this was the shape as a result of a resultant of the force, and therefore it is always axial. And when it is axial, even a membrane can take that load. Okay. So it was in that idea here, instead of singular chain, it was a net created by the golden chain. Professor Vasavada was to be also there. And Ada Shah, the secretary or the colleague of Professor Fry Otto, had come in CEPT, and our batch, we did one shell. So first there was form finding, and once the form was found, idea was to have this net where you don't have bulges in between. When it takes a smooth shape, then all forces are resolved. Then you just measure that, and you just let that particular coordinate lifted by that, and you would have a stable structure. That structure stood for several years, in fact, even after graduation. So I'm making the chain model for that.
So I think it's not
no,
there
no,
right now.
right now it's 40 years plus, 45 years.
So this one is award.
Oh, my hair is receding. But this is Shrikant Nevsarkar as a president of Triple ID, Indian Institute of Interior Designer. This is my first ever award in the life. And this was, I never competed, but City Museum. And in fact, I had only sent color Xeroxes of that as an entry. But I had curated and created that Ahmedabad City Museum. And somehow that won the first prize. I mean, that won the first prize for me. And this is that prize.
So sweet. So this one probably Manav Sadhana.
Yes. Oh, but first of all, this is the seat. We used to sit in Sangath at Vastushilp Foundation, which was a kind of the Everest vaulted ceiling outside. Then we sat upstairs in the mezzanine, and then eventually we got that back area. So this was my seat in that last corner of the Sangath. And this is, of course, yes, Manav Sadhana model, the second phase. Behind is that Vidyadhar Nagar poster that we had made. So yes, this is me in Vastushilp Foundation.
Slowly we are receding with hairs.
This is the post-earthquake rehabilitation. My son Spandan was born on the day and the time of the earthquake, and the earthquake was a very severe kind of a disaster occurring in the region. So yes, of course, the schools were shut, and we all took initiatives. So from foundation, we took this, and we did it for 3 years, that we employed ourselves in getting rehabilitation of some of the earthquake affected villages. So we ended up eventually working in 18 villages, and this was the first one. At that point in time, We were working for Ishwar Bhai Patel, and to my right is Jayesh Bhai Patel,
Okay.
the son of him. And we were working on the Sanitation Institute. So
Okay.
that's how we were part of that association. And then he said that, Yatin Bhai, we are trying to first go and do a little bit of kit distribution and stuff like survival kit and all. Would you like to come? Because maybe one day we would try to do something with their housing. So, ninth day of Spandan's birth as well as the earthquake, we went there and we first started with this village. It was Ludia, as the name was given, at the border of India and Pakistan, Khawda. And we tried this process of participatory
Yeah.
planning.
Yes,
And this
exactly.
also, I must say that I forget the name of it, it'll come back to me. But, this Christopher Alexander, pattern language. And there's one book of theirs, Peru Experiment. And this was one of those architects, partners. And he had come to lecture and he was talking about participatory site planning and all. And I took up a chance to apply that in real project here. So to my left are all the villagers, to my right is the sponsor Jayesh Bhai, and what you see is a thermocol model which we tried to play architect to say that what about open space like that, what we saw from the debris and how we would like to create. This is a road, this is the kind of depression, we can turn it into a water resource, and likewise, so that people can actually relate to it and understand.
Okay.
So just drawing and talking without, and this was also the model. Eventually, we took it to the site once everything was finalized to understand that, look, orientation is like that. That also would not be enough to understand scale. Models
Scale.
don't give you idea of scale to the layperson. So we actually pegged one plot with the actual four corners so that they could visualize it. That's how this was one of the very successful beginning, where people could relate to, they could know where they are and what is whose, and likewise. So it was very, very well kind of processed with people's 100% participation and likewise. So, and today also when we go there, they also treat us like family. That time on the ninth day, there was not even resources, meals and whatnot. We used to eat in langars or this Swaminarayan kind of camps. We used to sleep outside in a bus somewhere in Dharamshala. But eventually they emptied their houses and say, you stay here, and they would stay outside, the kind of rapport that got built.
So, sir, this project itself hold an idea of community participatory driven design. So, and what I am curious about that, as an architect here, we are trained to restrict to our creative visions. So, how difficult it was to rather than designing for them, it was something which was designing with them. So
yeah, you're still designing for them, but with them it is doing both, that they also relate to it. See, finally it is their ways of life, it is their aspirations, but you are still there. It's not just leaving it to them.
okay.
So that is why it's a great combination, that you become a catalyst, you become a facilitator. So you absorb what. So we worked on 18 village. Every 18 village we measured through, sitting there. There are no plans available. For those 3 years, I used to be 5 days there and maybe come sometime weekend here. So we've just been there, including those international studio students. They would come there, help us with all these. That's how it started. They wanted to be part of this humanities call and in the expertise of our own field. So for all of them, we sat with them. We made first the version that we thought would be like this, but then they bring out, because you need something to dialogue, just blank sheet, and also community drawing a camel, maybe an elephant. So you have to know the in between. So fact that we were there, we observed what they had, and therefore we could dialogue and distill it to something which was right for both. Okay, so first we made our version. To this they reflect and say that, yeah, but I think, this orientation is not right culturally. We don't face south. Then we have a kind of a neighborhood bonding, where so and so get along better, this don't get along. So likewise, when we started into all of these, we could arrive at what was from our end something which was necessary and right by our expertise in the field, as well as not taking away anything of them. For example, there was no door-to-door sanitation, and we could bring in, and overnight women adapted to that with joy, because it solved a lot of their health as well as social and safety problems. Okay, so a lot of new things could also be brought in. And for example, when we did the first layout, it was a linear, not a linear thing. We had some in between spaces and all. What they had first brought out, we had asked them to play a game that put your name and put your plot in a scale in this model where you would want to be. And they came up with a very linear layout. Then we said that, but would you not like an angan where festivities can come about? Your daughter's wedding has to be possibly taking place there. And they said, yes, we like that idea, and they adapted to that. So that's how it was a dialogue. It was not leaving to anyone, just like that.
Okay.
Not only in planning, organizing, what amenities they need. In our mind, it would have never occurred that you need a grass bank. They said we are 72 kilometers from Bhuj, and for our cattle, immediate area, it's all drought and desert. We have to get this, but if we get individually, it costs us more and it's so much of effort. So if we can get tractor load, it is cheaper. We can store it for the whole village, and therefore we would be happy to have a grass bank, Now, these things in your own programming would never come out. So what is also the priority? Sometimes there are schools nearby. So every village does not need to have school, because there are not so many teachers there. So this is how I think we could do that give and take, but model was a good tool to make them understand, for example, not only of this, but even for house, not in this project, but others, we had a model half of 3 component, kitchen, room, and wash area. And we would organize in front of them and say, no, this works for us better, likewise.
Okay.
And even what is community? Sometimes somebody who speaks loudly would tend to speak on behalf, but others don't agree. We had some contractor who had returned from overseas, Dubai, and he said we would have swimming pool and we would have attached bath, and that is culturally not acceptable. So we said, we put it to a general assembly, and they said, murmured and said no. So then we said, but how about this? And they said yes. So it was that sense of ownership and belonging that all of them have now turned into a very prosperous and kind of a living, very harmonious living environments. We started with just 20 because of the resources, and 20 poorest of poor Harijan family. But when eventually, over a year and a half that we stayed there, and then 3 years that we continued to work, we ended up, for just this area, one group, 455. Then, of course, we did several thousands all put together for 18 villages likewise. So it is not, if you go with your prejudiced ego and the form in mind, you can say there might be a conflict. But what is client's bottom line? He's concerned about economics, he's concerned about functionality, and of course, some sense of aesthetics. So when you satisfy these, the rest what you do is not his problem. So everything we did, like this particular project, was 75 rupees a square feet, which was 1/5 the cost set by government for rest of the development that was happening there. So it was 1/5 cost, and yet arguably even today, I say better. Why? Because today government has these tourism packages, and one of the package, they take them to this village which has been recreated, because that's only where the traditional house form and the cultural dimensions and their craft has still survived. Okay, so our effort was also here to see that the traditional know-how is used, local technique is used, local material is used. They get employment for doing their own house's work. They were getting 3,000 rupee labor to do their own house. Youth was employed in this and therefore not wandering here and there. And the kids were also taken care of by the NGO to train them, to educate them. So it was win-win, including the craft, that they knew the craft, but they were doing certain things. You know, as much that you would take for granted, Kutch was like another place. It was not so connected to Gujarat. They would not say we are Gujarat, part of Gujarat. It was like another area, another state, you may say. But that brought in, they came to mainstream, and the NGO even brought in designers, marketing people to offload their crafts. And because this is, when earthquake happened, it was typically a tourist season beginning. And now nobody would be looking at their craft. So to offload them, there were exhibitions held here. But all those things apart, the point is that there was this positive give and take to retain what is theirs culturally, skill-wise, craft-wise, and the architectural character-wise theirs, and yet bring in sanitation, which may not have been there, other infrastructure, other amenity, and in a quicker time, do it with a coordinated manner. Okay. And so this is the kind of way it was done. So I would say engaging with client gives you clarity, and with your own concerns added to that, it becomes a win-win for both.
Okay.
Client also owns it and you also own it. So it can bring out best of both.
It's not always about architect's ego. Yeah.
No, it's never should be. I always say architectural profession is like that of doctors. Do you think any doctor has a prefixed treatment for any next patient who is going to come?
No.
He always looks at patient, talks to him, finds his history, symptom, and then he first diagnoses that this is that, and then he prescribes the treatment, not just medicine, maybe exercise, maybe diet, maybe this. So what is always done is appropriate. Design, there is nothing like good, bad or ugly. It is always appropriate or inappropriate, and appropriate to place, people, program and planet. So I think that's where, I think it's always that sharing of first understanding. You know, the doctor puts himself into your shoe to understand that when he's saying paining here, that means this, but at the same time, this symptom doesn't tell you to that. Therefore, finally, it is this. Okay. Once he says malaria, then you can go to the chemist and take the pill. But fever is because of malaria, viral, organ failure, whatever. So that's what we have to do, that what is appropriate for him, for his program, for his place. So you have to know his part of it, and yet you bring in your kind of knowledge base to say that out of these many choices for you, this is appropriate.
Okay, so shall we move on to next image?
Of course.
Okay, so this person is currently into headline also. Sonam Wangchuk.
Oh, no. I admire him, Sonam Wangchuk. He came to Sanitation Institute. Jayesh Bhai is there, and I was explaining him the concept, and he was very happy. Of course, he's a modest person, and he says, I learn a lot, but no other way around, that there's a lot to learn from him. But yes, I met him twice, and in fact thrice, but this was at Sanitation Institute. He was looking around the campus.
Okay, so this one probably at Spice Shop.
No, this is, yes, you're right, that is part of the international studio, and also that many other heritage walk that I very proudly and very passionately take. So this is taking them through the city of Ahmedabad, and one of the characteristic of the marketplace that they still across the counter, not across the counter inside, but across the street, transactions happening. And this is one of the favorite spot that I stop to first understand various spices. Today with the mixed masalas which are already ready ground, we don't understand that sometimes some of these garam masalas have 42 ingredients within them. We don't even know the names of many of these spices or their original form. So I make them see this, and always have them try some of the mouth fresheners or stuff like that, which are also very special and unique to this place. So I call it an experiential walk, in
Okay.
which there's also taste as a part of it, apart from sight and touch and whatnot. We also have the flower gully, and you also have the fragrance. So this is that spice shop in Manek Chowk.
Okay. So this one is again some family photo.
Oh yeah. No. Very larger family,
Larger
world
family.
family, you can say. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. This is again one of those international studios, and as part of excursion or some event, we go around to some of those architectural landmarks. So this is at Ahmedabadni Gufa, Hussain Doshi Gufa, and one of the batches.
Okay. So this might be probably meeting some old friends.
Oh yes. This after, I don't know, 30 years ago, later, or 35 years later, should I say almost 40, our batch is reunion at CEPT. So these are some of my classmates, some from year earlier, some from then after. So yes, this is Ashish, Samir, Vipin, Kulkarni, Prithvish, Pardeshi, Munir, Yogesh.
So this was again.
That was 1978 as an entry batch in CEP.
This was the whole batch, I guess.
No, this is not a whole batch. This is a whole school.
Okay.
Whoever were there around.
Okay.
So this is Mr. Doshi's entire family, and this is one of those events. I think his 70th birthday or so, where we had a cake cut at the premise, and the rest of the ones, it was the workies there. So there's the school people then. This is me.
So, sir, do you remember this?
Oh yes, of course.
And
My
along
handwriting.
with that, this photo when Doshi sir was actually reading it.
Oh, okay.
This was
No, after this is, I think, yeah, you say 26th August, as we know, is Professor Doshi's birth date. And right from my foundation days, we had started this tradition that, he would not interfere too much into what we were doing and all. So just one way of making him see what's happening, as well as certain extra activities that we would have conducted, he would not be aware. We would present to him some of those. So sometimes we created his monograph of works, and likewise. So every time I wrote a small little wish poem or something, and that's what we used to present. But even after I left Vastushilp Foundation, we continued with that tradition that usually before he gets into his puja routine, all my staff from Footprints and trainees who have them a chance to meet with the legend, and he also loved meeting students and young
actually
people.
I was the one fortunate one who took this to Doshi sir
Oh,
that
great!
time.
So that's why I don't know
Yeah,
him
exactly.
reading this,
Exactly.
but yes, he would then
And
call and say that
That was the time was
received
very
the wish.
tricky. So you strictly told us not to go inside. But for me, it was first and last chance. So I still tried and got a chance to meet him in
Oh,
person.
that's nice. So yes, the tradition we kept alive till he was around. Thank you.
This photo.
Oh yeah, This is again one of the reviews or final jury. This is Haresh to the extreme left, who was in Germany, of course, my batchmate, but he used to bring students from there, and we used to invite local architects for the review, etc. So I think it's one of the presentations being reviewed. Professor Chaya is there, Rajiv Katpalia is there, Professor Doshi, and of course I'm there. So yes, it's one of those reviews. They're a very intense workshop, and it continued even afterwards. I did it for 10 other years. So for 20 years, just till the corona, we had that workshop. I continued on my own after. Very recently, year ago, we had it for the New York School of Interior Design, and likewise.
So the last one, the bigger picture.
Oh, I'm glad you found this. Looking very
president.
proud to have met these personalities, as Professor Abdul Kalam, Dr. and Narendra Bhai Modi. This time he was the chief minister, and of course Abdul Kalam Sahib was the president. 2005, there was a kind of a, I mean, he never calls it inauguration, and there was still some work going on. But he visited this campus before it was occupied, Environmental Sanitation Institute campus. And I was explaining to him the concepts behind that, because he being a scientist, he would be interested in that. So I was explaining to him this concept, and I remember him asking, why you use bricks, and I say it's a local material, insulative material. And after explaining a few things, he said, so you think your building is a green building? I said, yes, we feel so. And then also one of the things which was part of the institute's activity, and also we made it into a display, was a one tumbler flush, after a lot of experiments and whatnot. And he being the scientist himself, he would pour water and check out how fast the water is going through and all. So, of course, very proud and humbled to have met him. And of course, then he sat and he had, and I must say that was so concerned that while we were going through this, he reminded me that because that time, there were 1,000+ people, and they were outside, and even though it was winter, but sun was getting overhead, and he says that I think we should be with them. They are waiting for us. So he kind of reminded that let's not make people wait and all, And one more, there exists a picture, but I don't have it with me. That not for the big namesake I'm saying this, but I think the work did interest people who valued for that time. With President Bill Clinton came to India first time post earthquake, and his foundation was to support some activities, So he had been invited to Akshardham, Gandhinagar. And with that BAPS Institute, we had already started working out of 10 that eventually worked, in 3 of them. Actually, 13 we were to work on. So some work had already started, and including this Gandhi Nugam ones that you saw. And we had some photographs kept of that. And he was made to go through that, and I was there to explain to him. So it was very, very interestingly or patiently listening to that. And he understood the processes that we were going through. And he had his delegation where one of his colleague was Mike Patel, Then, of course, so he was discussing with me, and then he was called that Pramukh Sahib is calling you. So then, of course, his bodyguard and everybody would rush him out. And so the delegation went further, and he remembered that he had yet not thanked me. So he came back. He called, "Hey, Mikey, I think this is the way we should go about it. We would try to do this approach. And he told me, I'd like to learn more and come back. And then he shook hands. So for 2 days, I didn't take a bath. Of course, then he was huddled away and he didn't come back. But that was also where we had already done a few things which he thought was worthwhile. And he told his delegation to try similar things.